Oh hey, didn't see you there. You see, I get most of my knowledge on the world events from what has an anime face on it. And I have a project involving world wars going on, so I have to find something that's part anime and part history. I have to understand it. Now this I get.
HYPERDIMENSION NEPTUNIA is a game about if the console war was an actual war, but the consoles were anime girls.
Hold on, did I read that right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a thing to imagine, but it sure as hell exists. Neptunia started development as a collaborative effort with a partner company, and the premise was centered around three sisters that were all princesses and a protagonist. All designed by Sunako, known for her work on quite a few games. Then the partnership fell through and we somehow ended up here. I would pay any amount of money to find out how we went from princess sisters to console anime girls, and what scares me the most is I may never know. While we are talking about the remake that came out in 2013 in Japan and 2014 everywhere else, and eventually on Steam in 2015, I just want to take a look at the original release. HYPERDIMENSION NEPTUNIA for the PS3, which released in 2010 in Japan and 2011 elsewhere. The game was a lot more story-driven, given blocks of text and loads of world building. But there was gameplay. It was originally a basic turn-based combat thing, and man does it put the base in basic as a form of a combo system, but yeah. Everything feels a bit slow, music's painfully, yeah, that's a song right there, and Neptune has a gun?
So do I, where's my game?
Dungeon exploration didn't really have anything unique either. Also, random encounters, but they were heavily distance travel based, so not really that random. But what this game did do is incredible.
Make me uncomfortable?
Yeah, this game is pretty bad, and it isn't like reviewers didn't know it either, but this is the first game in what spawned the entire franchise that has so many games and just other pieces of media. If you have been a part of the anime community, there's a chance you've seen something Neptunia at some point, whether it be fan art, someone's online icon, or maybe the game on an actual shelf, but why am I talking about this in a positive manner?
Because this sure as hell isn't the game I played.
Like I mentioned earlier, the Rebirth remake was the one I played, and dear lord did this give the series the facelift it so desperately needed. And I won't lie, the original has a form of charm to it, but it wasn't gonna attract any new fans anytime soon. In 2013 it was decided to reimagine the games, and yeah, I actually wonder how it didn't get more of a fanbase at launch on the PlayStation Vita and was an exclusive on there for 2 years. Now before we get into the actual story and game itself, what was different? Well, for starters, dungeon exploration was lifted from Neptunia Victory, where you can jump and search and actually enjoy the experience, so was the gameplay where your character's position mattered in terms of strategy, and the story as a whole was reworked, which involved adding and removing characters. There was also better voice acting, the remake system that gave you special perks if you go with it just became so much more digestible. And with all of that, we are ready to go into the actual game itself. HYPERDIMENSION NEPTUNIA is based in a world called Game Industry, where there exists 4 different lands that worship 4 different CPUs, which stands for Console Patron Unit, which acts as its gods, basically. And the more shares their land has, or belief their people have in them, the stronger they are. And these are the core characters we know. There is Vert, Greenheart, which represents the Xbox and is the goddess of the land Winbox. Her character is a hardcore gamer girl who loves nothing more than making scenes uncomfortable and staying up for days at a time, and am I still alive? Why can't I feel my face? There's also Noor, Blackheart, which represents the PlayStation and is the goddess of the land last station. Her character is the loner Tsundere. She was an enjoyable character when on screen, but nothing too special. There's my favorite CPU, Blanc, Lightheart, who represents the Wii, and his character is just so damn entertaining. At first she follows the quiet girl archetype, but she's very quick to get mad and cuss, like a lot. I love it. Now, what could the 4th CPU be based on? Perhaps a long undiscussed part of the gaming sphere that usually stands by itself in terms of it's the Sega Neptune. You know, or probably don't, the console that was supposed to be a combination of the Genesis and 32X.
You know, the Sega Neptune!
Neptune, Purple Heart, the protagonist that represents, yeah sure, and is the goddess over Planetoon, is the first character that I really hate but adore. She pseudo breaks the fourth wall, calling herself the main character and refers to the events in the game as well game. She does a fantastic job keeping the characters together and driving the plot along. But she doesn't feel like the stock generic hyper-innocent girl. She teases the other characters, responds to being made fun of, makes this awful face. She's just enjoyable, but I would love to know how tall she is to see if I could kick her in the head. Oh, but you wanted more characters, right? Well, thank God, because there's too damn many. There's Kompa, which represents a game developer Compile Heart. There's IF for Idea Factory, literally the best character in gigantic Steins Gate reference. Mages, who represents the developer. Well, Mages. But dear lord, is that not all? I wish it was, but not nearly close. But this is where one of my issues comes from. The issue comes with the rest of the characters. They were introduced earlier in the game, but they were flooded into the party near the end. There is Tekken, a reference to the game series Tekken, who is DLC in Neptunia Victory, CyberConnect 2, which is the same as before and matches her namesake. Falcom was a DLC character in MK2, but her design in Rebirth is the same as Victory, which she is again DLC in. Broccoli, who represents a merchandise company, first appearance in Victory. Marvelous AQL, that represents a company in Marvelous. I'm sure you know the pattern by now. I don't have an issue with this many characters, and even better that they became main cast members and they are used to explain that Rebirth and the originals are both canon in their own way, but the way it's utilized just made them feel like they were added to have a bigger cast for the party list. Okay, we got our setting, our characters. How about that gameplay I mentioned before?
They took out the gun.
Gameplay got a gigantic revamp based on the third game in the series. Instead of being purely turn-based, you also have to keep in mind where you are in terms of the battlefield. You have to be a specific distance for your actions to work. You can't use items on party members too far away, you can't attack enemies too far away, your attacks can affect multiple enemies if they're close enough together, different weapons have different hitboxes. It's genuinely fun and might be my favorite use of turn-based combat, giving it that extra layer to make it feel more unique. Early on you have to think, but it slowly devolves into just circling the enemy, hitting until you get your ultimate super flashing move and their armor is broken, and then you just kinda just win.
I feel like there are a large number of ways they could have improved the combat even more, like making enemies weak from certain angles, changing how elements worked, bringing back the gun.
There's also dungeon exploration, but it's just dungeon exploration. You run around, fight enemies, get from point A to point B while picking up stuff along the way. While inoffensive, I'm not crazy about the fact that each dungeon's so short and why many of them look the same exact way. Not just similar. Almost identical with the same layout and everything. And oh, I hope that doesn't bother you because it isn't the same dungeon across the game but across the whole Rebirth sub-series, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay, so we got gameplay, characters, setting. What else does a good game need?
Extra pepper?
Something to deliver to random fans. I meant story. The story is about the goddess Purple Heart losing her memory, and it slowly turns into all of the other lands binding together to take down a huge threat on the world of the game industry. This is where a lot of details shine though by going through the game world. My favorite example was how in the land that represents PlayStation, it's full of industries, possibly a reference to how much Sony utilizes third parties. It's clever ways for world building like that, which has real world parallels that I love, and while the story makes sense for its setting, it's never taken too seriously, being full of happy banter, lack of logic like just a pair of glasses being able to disguise gods, and most threats are kinda just walkthrough, which I personally have no issue with. I love a serious story that has serious stakes, and there have been times where I've rolled my eyes at something that failed to deliver that, but this isn't trying to be serious. This plot feels more like a delivery for the characters' funny interactions. While most of the time they are lighthearted and fun, like Blonde ready to fight everyone for having a different preference in how she eats her food, sometimes it has a habit of being just way too... Yeah, notice how at no point I mentioned a male character? They basically don't exist except for kinda sorta villains and just weird characters. Which makes the entire cast female and their designs clothed with a big asterisk next to it. This game has a very bad case of the horny, and while it's not fatal, it's a yikes and a half. The game has these CGs that look really good, but for whatever reason a part of their body is always animated, and you know exactly the part I'm talking about. The part I can play a spring sound effect on for no reason. Oh, also thank God, but the music is better, and not what the hell ever it was before in the original.
HYPERDIMENSION NEPTUNIA is a game series I really have to come to terms with existing. At its best, it's really fun with great turn-based combat and really fun humor. And at its worst, it's oddly erotic for a video game about video game consoles. And I can see why the entire rebooted series is kind of like based on the third game. It's so revolutionary. Like, look, the collector's edition came with 2 lunchboxes. I can bring so many sandwiches with me now.